Florida Governor Ron DeSantis moving in the opposite direction of Michigan Governor, the Eva Peron of East Lansing there, Gretchen Whitmer, when it comes to staying open in perpetuity as opposed to staying regulated in perpetuity. DeSantis was on with Maria Bartiromo, and he had this to say about the next step in preventing the institution of vaccine passports in Florida.
So I did an executive order prohibiting that in Florida, both from government and from private industry. And we have a bill going through the Florida legislature that'll make that permanent. Here's the deal, Maria. We don't want to go down this road. It's not a business's, they have no right to know what shots you've had or not had. That's not how we've ever ordered American society. If you want to go to a ball game, you should be able to buy a ticket and go to a ball game without having to show your personal health information. And so we believe it's important to draw a line in the sand on this. When the Biden administration was talking about doing it, I immediately came out and said it's not going to happen in Florida. A lot of states have now followed my lead, and I think that that is the direction that the country needs to go. We've encouraged people to get vaccines. I think it's been effective, particularly for our seniors. We look in Florida, the hospitalization rates have plummeted among senior citizens because we vaccinated seniors first. At the same time, it should not be a requirement for you to participate in the broader society. And so we've drawn a hard line on that. I'm very supportive of getting our cruise lines back up and running. That's actually another area that we're suing the Biden administration on, because they've closed the cruise lines for a year now, and we think they should be able to sail, but we also don't think that they should be able to require your personal health information in that regard.
Right, cruise lines requiring vaccine passports. The Miami Heat have proposed to have different seating sections for those who are vaccinated and those who are not vaccinated.
Really?
I mean,
what do you think about that? Oh my gosh.
How about separate drinking fountains? Lunch counters?
There you go. Yeah.
For more on all this, we're pleased to be joined by Ryan Bourne. He is the R. Evan Scharf Chair for the Public Understanding of Economics. Good luck with that. He's got a new book out, Economics in One Virus. Nice hat tip to Henry Hazlitt there. An introduction to economic reasoning through COVID-19. Ryan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you. Hi.
An introduction to economic reasoning through COVID-19. Economic reasoning and COVID-19, those two phrases don't belong in the same sentence, do they?
Well, some might say not, but I think one thing that we've seen this year is that as a result of all this disruption, both from the virus itself, the pandemic, and then the political reaction to it, a lot of us in our individual lives and in public policy terms, there's been huge consequential decisions made. And in order to inform consequential decisions, you need good economic thinking. You need to think about trade-offs. You need to think about how your efforts are influencing people's behavior and their incentives. And so my book really is to just try and give an introduction to people perhaps not accustomed to thinking in the economic way, a way of analyzing the decisions that have been made according to those principles.
Well, let's start by being a little bit counterintuitive. One of the questions your book pursues answers to is areas where the legacy of the pandemic will improve economic policymaking.
Yeah, so I think one area where we may see some improvement is we've had to relax a whole bunch of regulations, particularly on medical innovation through this pandemic, streamlining the process for vaccines and other treatments. And I think coming out of this is a big opportunity for libertarians, especially, to highlight the role of the FDA and the way that it's prevented a lot of the testing and rapid testing and actually held up solutions that could have eased a lot of the pain of the pandemic much earlier. So coming out of this, I think there's a real opportunity to reform the processes by which individuals can gain access to the treatments, the drugs, the tests that enable them to lead kind of more healthy lives and actually facilitate more economic activity being able to continue in instances like this.
Well, what can public health officials and epidemiologists learn from economists?
Well, I think the key thing they can learn is how to weigh up risks and benefits of different decisions and trade-offs. Early in this crisis, the FDA was holding up tests on the grounds that if there were inaccurate tests on the market, public health officials would have a faulty view of the state of the pandemic. But an economist would look at it and say, Well, you know what's even worse than having 40 tests on the market? Having no tests on the market. Because when we have no tests on the market that people are able to access, you've got a lot of people walking around as false negatives. They're infected with COVID without realizing it. And as a result of that, as a result of not being able to isolate and identify the infected individuals, of course, we all then had to live to a certain extent as if everybody else was positive. So an economist would have looked at the costs and benefits of those regulations and said, at the moment we should be waving tests through. Unfortunately, public health officials don't tend to be particularly versed in this kind of risk-benefit analysis.
Yeah, speaking of risk-benefit analysis, too, even after you get to the vaccine to market stage, there was a debate that happened. I wouldn't say it raged because not too many people paid attention to it, but the argument of first shot first for the two-shot viruses, for two-jab vaccines, I should say. And Alex Tabarrok over at George Mason University was one of those leading the first shot first approach to vaccinations, meaning, first shot, get everybody with the first shot because it provides some inoculation, some protection, and then, worry about the second shots secondarily. And it seems to, from an efficiency, get as many people protected as possible, that seems to would have been a better approach than the approach that was pursued.
Yeah, it's better for almost everybody to have, a vaccine that's 70-80% efficacy than half the people to have a 95% efficacy vaccine with everybody else, not having been vaccinated at all. And indeed, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the UK. There they adopted the first proposal. They staggered the vaccines, the first dose to the second dose, for a 12-week period rather than the kind of 4 to 5 week period we've seen with the Moderna and Pfizer here. And as a result, they've now vaccinated pretty much 100% of all categories down to just over 40-year-olds, I believe now. So, they've had 4 deaths in the last day. So these vaccines work. They've been able to get on top of the virus by adopting that policy. And I think that's exactly the type of thing that I'm talking about, the ability to weigh up the risks of those staggered doses as opposed to the benefits of ending this pandemic sooner.
Have you been vaccinated?
I was really lucky, actually. I was in a supermarket back in January when the vaccines were first being rolled out, and it was the day after the riots here in DC on the 6th of January. So I was there on the 7th, and so many people just didn't turn up for their appointments, but I was in the frozen meat section of a Safeway and was actually offered the vaccine. So I've been vaccinated for quite a while.
Wow, look at that.
Get a nice cut along with your vaccine. That's a program.
But I think that highlights an economic issue as well, because the government here in DC at the time was centrally planning who should be allocated the vaccine, and they'd only opened it out to a very, very small number of people. And as a result of that, there were people missing appointments. And, I was just lucky and happened to be there. But if you were kind of thinking through, should I have been the priority for that, you'd have probably said no. And if we'd have had some sort of more decentralized market-based system, then perhaps somebody who, that would have, some essential worker or somebody at high risk would have got that vaccine before I did. But as a result of that mechanism of allocation, there were vaccines about to be wasted. So I was just very, very fortunate.
Yeah, well, and the genius of the founders in our federalist system is you've got 50 laboratories of democracy. And so what you're describing actually did happen. Different states did it differently. And so a state like West Virginia that leaned on its private sector businesses, the pharmacies that already have existing relationships with so many people, they were able to do a better job quicker than states like New York, where they tried to run it through a central bureaucracy.
Certainly, yeah. West Virginia has done really well on this. I think you're right. In a pandemic like this, you do need a high degree of experimentation. I was quite kind of critical last year, early on, when the vast majority of states pressed that emergency button to lock down. One big problem that we had is we weren't getting that kind of feedback mechanism that experiments give us of what works and what doesn't work. And I think one of the big downsides of this pandemic is that despite the fact we have that experimentation at a state level, I don't see much in some of the bigger states. I didn't see much kind of error correction over time. California was still banning a whole bunch of outdoor activity months and months after we knew that this virus doesn't really transmit particularly well outdoors. And I think the experiments are there all across the country, and we should learn from them.
Right. I mean, in Michigan, we were just talking about this earlier in the program. You have Gretchen Whitmer proposing to extend the COVID regulations on businesses in perpetuity. Things like not only forcing companies to not allow workers to share workspaces, phones, and so on and so forth, because of the prospect of transmission through surfaces, which we know is nil, and as well as now new things, actually doubling down, things like requiring a COVID-19 safety coordinator to be on site in your business for public-facing businesses, which is now actually more regulation than even we had at the height of the outbreak.
Well, Michigan's in a tough spot because the UK variant there is running wild, and when an emergency does hit, politicians tend to want to be seen to be doing as much as possible. So I expect that's why we're hearing the announcements at the moment. But of course, as you say, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in terms of surface cleaning, that's all just pandemic theatre at this stage. We know this is primarily an airborne and droplet transmitted virus. I can't believe now that we're not kind of overwhelmingly focusing on the importance of ventilation rather than a lot of this stuff around surface cleaning and spacing people through offices. But that's the stuff that it's much easier for politicians to do that stuff than actually think about the hard questions in regards to making it kind of safe for businesses to open and operate and allowing them to innovate, because politicians don't have the knowledge of how individual businesses can change their practices, change their behavior in order to continue to serve customers safely. So they reach for these easy regulations, these very crude regulations that they can apply to everyone.
You mentioned lockdowns, the knee-jerk move to lockdown right out of the gate, and I wonder if you think that was the most catastrophic decision that was made by politicians across the globe, and that was the worst example of living in this fictional world where we don't have to make decisions that involve trade-offs.
I'm not sure that initial lockdown was the worst decision that was made, in part because there was so much uncertainty at the time. It's easy to look back in hindsight and think that we could have found much better and cheaper ways to do things. But back last year, we kind of didn't really know how this thing transmitted particularly well. We didn't know how people would react to it. I think what has been a massive error is states that have kind of reached for these cruder lockdowns, even when we know much more about how this virus spreads and how people have reacted to it, and the abilities for businesses to adapt to a bunch of outdoor activity or to integrate better ventilation into their services and things like that. So I think the lack of kind of learning from what we've seen around the world, particularly when you look at the other approaches that we've seen from countries such as South Korea, where by really targeting and identifying those who are actually infected, you can allow the vast majority of the population to continue to lead their life as normal. And I think as a result of that, the overwhelming failure that we've seen, the biggest failure, was actually a failure to pass and facilitate the testing, first of all. Because if we'd have done that, I see that as the kind of original sin of this pandemic. If we'd have done that, we'd have been able to target the measures that were necessary, only those who were infected or the contacts of people who were infected. And as a result of not having that capacity to do that then policymakers reacted with all these incredibly crude proposals, which of course mean that there's a whole bunch of people, the vast majority of people who are not infected, who are severely restricted in what they can do in their everyday life.
He is Ryan Bourne. He is the R. Evan Scharf Chair for the Public Understanding of Economics at the Cato Institute. The book, Economics in One Virus, An Introduction to Economic Reasoning Through COVID-19. Ryan, thanks for joining us. Good luck with the book.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Are you aware that AmericanEagle.com has been designing websites since the internet started? Do you know they've helped companies large and small achieve results that they themselves thought impossible? Today, a well-designed website is an art form. There are no cookie-cutter solutions. At AmericanEagle.com, they are proud to design and develop a website that fits their client's business. Their experience shows that a well-designed website with the client's business at the forefront, will bring an excellent return on their investment. Clients, from startups to medium and large businesses, have come to rely on them for a full line of website services, from consulting and integration to digital strategy and marketing, hosting and maintenance. AmericanEagle.com is the technology partner you need if you're looking for online success. They work with all kinds of companies in nearly every industry. Give the team at AmericanEagle.com a call today, 1-877-WEB-NOW-1. Let them help you achieve online results and success. AmericanEagle.com, that number again, 1-877-WEB-NOW and the number 1, 1-877-WEB-NOW-1.
What are you doing for yourself? What are you doing to take care of your castle? How about taking Balance of Nature? Just take 6 capsules a day. You're getting 10 servings of 31 different fruits and veggies. I bet you can't even name 31 different fruits and veggies. But this is a real deal. No preservatives, no dyes, all natural, GMO